Building off the last video, you know what I'm saying? I know I've already mentioned a couple of these, but I'm about to do it again. And I'm about to use myself an example. I'm not special. Don't listen to this like I'm special. Listen to this like do the same thing for yourself. Build that same connection with your life and what you got going on. All right? Where were you born? First of all, we don't take credence or enough respect. Some of us do. Let me not say that. Some niggas be like, yo, I'm from St. Louis, and they kind of rep that to death. Shout out to y'all. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be like, I'm from Compton. You know what I'm saying? You're supposed to take pride in that. You know what I'm saying? It's cool to take pride in where you're from. You're from there for a reason. You know what I'm saying? You could have incarnated anywhere else. If you want to say the creator created you, that motherfucker could have put you anywhere else. But they put you where you were born for a reason. You know what I'm saying? We're kind of conditioned that because we weren't born in Zimbabwe, like where we were born is like bad for us. It's not something we should relate to. Because essentially niggas are gonna say it's like, everything is connected to something outside of us. So it's either like white people, it's either some other like European, or it's like Asia. It's like everything belongs to everybody but us, unless we're like from Zimbabwe. But if you were born in St. Louis, doesn't that mean like if you were born in St. Louis, the way that it's being portrayed to you is like it was an accident. You know what I'm saying? Instead of you taking pride in where you was born, someone is telling you should have been born in Zimbabwe, or you should have been born in West Africa. And the ideology behind that makes it seem like what happened to you wasn't supposed to happen to you. You know what I'm saying? But then you got to start asking the question. If you are believing in creation and believing somebody created you, something of a higher power, higher nature created you, and set you off on this journey that we call life, and, gave you a purpose. If you are agreeing to believe in that, how can you believe that you were put in the wrong place and born at the wrong time? That wouldn't make any sense. It's like, no, you was meant to be born where you was born. So this is why you got to take more pride in this stuff. Even when you went to a certain school, you know what I'm saying? Even when we be like public school is foolishness and it's mind control or whatever. I'm not saying that it's not, but it's still a part of your story. You could have been going anywhere else. You could have been born into a family that homeschools, but you weren't. You know what I'm saying? You were born and you lived and you were around the people and you were around certain places for a certain reason. You know what I'm saying? This is all a part of your story. Getting in touch with why you here. Getting in touch with like, if you have a hard time tracing your ancestry, this could kind of help you, put pieces of the puzzle together, because you'll notice how a lot of things from your life correlate with your parents' life and the country or the place that you're from. So if you're from a certain, I'll get to that. But like if you're from a certain country, you'll notice how that country's history aligns with your history, like from your personal life that you've been living. Where were you born? What's the name of the hospital? What places have you lived? Have you just lived in one neighborhood your whole life? Have you noticed you've been going back and forth to certain places? Have you noticed that, you have family in a certain areas that may have a connection to each other? All of this is significant. If you always went to a family reunion in Memphis, Tennessee, then you have a connection to Memphis. Even if you only there for 3 days out the year, but if you did that 10 years in a row, I mean, that's a reason, and your family's probably been doing that for a while. So it's like you have ties to that, even if you're not as directly connected. So that might only be a small piece of your story. Like if life was like a sitcom, that would only be like a random episode. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, this is season 6. We running out of shit to write about. Here's the episode where they're at the family reunion. You know what I'm saying? But so what I'm trying to say is it may not be super important, but it still tells a piece of the story. It still adds a piece to the puzzle that you're trying to put together to get more in tune with yourself, I guess. All right. So what kind of people did you grow up around? what's their nationality, what's their background, what did they look like, where did they come from, who did you vibe with the most naturally, and then who did you naturally not fuck with. You know what I'm saying? That's very important. Where is your family from? What's the name of the schools that you went to? What's the name of the schools your family went to? What's the school's history? You know what I'm saying? You like, especially if you in the hood, you'll be surprised these places that we go. These places that we go to school is where like the niggas with money used to go to school. It just doesn't sound believable. A lot of these neighborhoods, even here locally, like where the hood is now, are used to be like rich Jewish neighborhoods for a lot of places. You know what I'm saying? Where like I live locally, like places I used to be around that's like, quote unquote bad areas. At one point in time, it was like people with money lived there. They were upper mobile, like Jewish neighborhoods, and the people just kind of moved to the next town. The next town's over, but that's how it was. So what I'm trying to say is like, if your parents went to a certain school, the way that we would look at it, like, oh, a nigga went to Yale. At one point in time, niggas wasn't going to college. So just going to a certain high school, or just going to school, period. Because you got to understand, we are some of the first people in our family to ever go to school. Like, we the first, like, that's why we, depending on, how you can trace your ancestry and stuff, you should have some parent or uncle or something who can't really like read and write, because we just started going to school. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's something that's like a modern concept. Not like that we didn't have schools when we were having tribes and civilizations and stuff. I'm talking about this version of school. So that's why, like, I have a lot of family members that can't read and write. They just know how to speak from getting spoken to. You know what I'm saying? And I used to think that something was wrong with them, but now that I have a greater understanding of how like niggas being like indigenous and stuff, and I'm gonna get to that in another video, that's just like, that's kind of how, I mean, if you just went to some village somewhere and took a nigga and brought him over here, he wouldn't know how to read and write and stuff like that either, because he didn't need to, based on his lifestyle. So I'm saying all of that to say, even if you went to some high school that was getting shot up, nigga, that shit is important. It's a part of your story. It's just, I'm rambling on. So yeah, what's the school's history? What's the history of all these places that you be going to, that you might have went to? The rec center, the Boys and Girls Club, the Y. What street was it on? These streets and stuff are built, or like, the street that you probably grew up on has probably been knocked down and built over many times. Some places still have the same building from way back in the day, but more than likely, that shit's been knocked down and rebuilt many times. So your community center might be where some prestigious place was, or it could be where some fucked up place was. You never know. And that might explain why a certain energy lingers around that place. But yeah, what's the history of that street? Who, like, try to go as deep as possible. You'll be surprised how it correlates with your life. Where are your friends from? Who, like, the people you just naturally gravitate to, where do they come from? You know what I'm saying? The people who are your closest, who in your life, and then the people who you don't be fucking with. Like, if you had to make a list of niggas that you don't fuck with, or used to fuck with and you don't, or they just rub you the wrong way, like, what about them correlates? Is there any correlations you can make? What kind of people are they? Where are they from? What school did they go to? What can you say about their parents? Like, how many correlations can you make? Because they're part of the story. All of these things help you connect to your ancient self. That's very first and foremost. I feel like it'll give you more appreciation for like your life now, even if you haven't had a lot of good experiences, because we're down here living out several stories, because we're like multi-layered being. So we're down here living a multi-layered story. And the story I'm referencing is like the human story we're living, which is almost like, right? Like, if you're having a real rough life right now in this incarnation, we living like in the kind of like that movie, The Princess Diaries. If you ever seen that, go watch that. Or any movies of those related natures, where it's like the people who was really the the people who was down bad getting treated bad, or a person down bad getting treated bad, not knowing that they was connected to something greater. They're just disconnected from it. And in this lifetime, they just down bad. Kind of, I feel like those are the movies you should watch to try to get a correlation of what the fuck going on now. But from this list that I have, I'm gonna start to use myself as an example to try to show you how I found out that some of this shit does correlate. Alright, so peep the correlations. Where were you born? What's your name and all of that, right? I said this in the first video, but I'm gonna just do it again just to paint a picture. My name is Malik. First of all, when I was a kid, because of the way my name is spelled, and my mom would always explain it to me that she couldn't really spell, she was trying to sound it out. So like Malik is a very common name. First of all, it's like between the amount of Arabic, like Middle Eastern people, and then just the amount of niggas with that name, like that shit is very common. So it's like usually Malik is spelled a certain way, but my shit is spelled crazy. Now, actually, I don't think that anymore. I kind of like it, but when I was a kid, I used to think it was spelled crazy. It's like Mahleik. There used to be a Malik with a Malique, and I know his mama was really wildin'. So that I used to like being in his class, cause his shit looked way worse than mine. I ain't even gonna lie. Malique, his mama was bugging. But either way, it's the energy behind the name. You know what I'm saying? We all put a little twist on it, but just to throw that out there, cause I don't want anyone to get mistaken. Like I'm saying this, like, yo, this nigga must think that he's special or something. It's like, nah, you just take this and apply it to yourself. Apply it to your life story, okay? So my name is Malik, and that means king. And I was born in Crown Heights, you know what I'm saying? And then I was born in Kings County Hospital. To see how those all correlate. All right, so that's like where I live now, right? Where I live now, where I got my first job, the name of the first basketball team that I like played for in Connecticut. Shit, a lot of things. Okay, all those things, like shit. A lot of jobs that I had in this one town that I live in now. My first basketball team was in this same town. It was in Hartford, but it was like somehow they had moved their organization to Hartford. So this town is called Manchester. You know what I'm saying? My family, both sides of my family, come from Manchester, Jamaica. So I start thinking like that can't be a coincidence. You know what I'm saying? There are no coincidences in this life. We love saying that when it's 11/11, but there gotta be something to that. There gotta be something to the fact that I have this connection to this piece of like this area. Where I live right now, I had a car accident right in front of this complex like 4 years ago. You know what I'm saying? 4 or 5 years ago, yeah. That can't be a coincidence. Like my first like real job was right down the street, walking distance from here. I used to drive by this place all the time. Then I used to work at the mall that's down the street from here. So I was still always just in this area. And I'm just noticing and I used to come out here because I started getting cool with my coworkers and stuff. So sometimes I come out here to hang out, so before I was living out here, I just developed a connection with this area. But what's the science behind that? Why do I have a connection to this area? And why do I have a connection to an area that's also named where like my family is from? Like that's a huge correlation, because the same people who was naming shit down there are the same people who was naming shit up here. So even though like we be asking questions like, why do so many Jamaicans live in Connecticut? Because Connecticut has a connection to Jamaica. The original, like the people who turned Jamaica into being British and the people who turned Connecticut into being European are the same people. So that's why it has such a strong connection. Some of the points that I'm trying to get to, I'm skipping ahead, but I'm trying to get to shit like, when you have a foreign family, you know what I'm saying? When your family comes from somewhere else and they come over here and they get successful, we almost don't pay that any mind. We just look at that as some like American dream shit. Or let me not assume. I don't even know how niggas look at that. But like lately I've been looking at that like, how the fuck are you doing that? Like, who are you? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did you come from another country? You open up a restaurant and it's successful. How did you like who are you? When you start to learn about history and stuff, you start to realize like everything is more about like bloodline, where you from, and that's why they say like connections and being plugged in and stuff run the world. But when you start to go back, it's like everything goes back to like certain families. Everything goes back to like certain neighborhoods, certain areas, certain territories, certain clans. You know what I'm saying? And we as a people have been disconnected to where we fit in that part of the story. We don't know what we like, where that part correlates for us. But those are the questions I'm starting to ask. Like, even on a sick level, when dudes are drug dealers and stuff, and they big drug dealers, I start to say like, yo, who is this nigga, and how is he getting plugged in with some guy in another country? Like how? Why is it not anybody else? Like, why is it this specific person? But I think about that on all levels. Like, when somebody come here and they owning something, like when you from this place, I feel like it's impressive as well. But when you come from somewhere else and you're doing that, like, you know how many people applied to come here? Why did your family get in? How did your family get in? You know what I'm saying? Why weren't they one of the people that was rejected? How many people applied to get like their green card and shit and get denied? Why were you one of the people accepted? Why, like, okay, again, like, we look at going to France and places like that as big deals. Some places is dirty as fuck. We look at that shit like it's a big deal. Belgium and going to all them places because they got rich architecture and all that stuff. And we don't even recognize the shit that we have locally. And I'm not just talking about where I live. I'm talking about all over. Because we are just taught to like not give a fuck about this place. Just hate it. But this is where we was born. If we was meant to be born somewhere else, we would have been. So it's like I feel like that's part of why we don't take pride in ourselves, because it's like they got us ashamed of who we are and where we're from. So you gotta understand, I'm a reincarnation of my parent. If my dad was playing for a soccer team locally growing up, he was playing for the Manchester team. You know what I'm saying? If he was going to play for the parish, he would be playing for like the Manchester team. And that's like, I turned around and did the same thing when I was playing basketball. It's like, I'm not even going to call it weird. It's interesting, This is an interesting rabbit hole. It's like niggas want to go down the alien rabbit hole. Fuck the aliens. You the alien. You know what I'm saying? Start looking at your life like you like that. Start treating it like it's interesting. This is a part of falling in love with yourself, falling in love with your story, falling in love with your history. You know what I'm saying? All of the people I grew up around. So let me just keep going by the list. What places have I lived? I have been traveling. Like, when I was young, I would go to Jamaica a lot, of course. Like, I would go almost a couple times a month. And then once I got older, like, I haven't gone since I was 10 years old. You know what I'm saying? Been a long ass time. But when I was a kid, I would go all the time. And so I've been basically having a connection to going to Jamaica, going to New Jersey, going to New York, and going to Connecticut, of course, and then going to Maryland. Those are the places I have a strong connection to. When you start looking at, if you could do a lot with this information. You could start looking at old maps and being like, oh shit, when I wasn't going to New York, I was going to New Amsterdam. Oh shit, when I was in this neighborhood, I was really in this neighborhood. That's what I'm trying to get to. What kind of people did you grow up around? I have been surrounded by Caribbean people in all forms. there was a period of time I was around a lot of Spanish people. I was like one of the only like 4 black people, I think, in the middle school that I went to. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of, let's say, I don't even like using these terms, but there was a lot of mixed people. There was a lot of like um so-called Afro like Latinas, but niggas was definitely not identifying as that. That word wasn't a thing. Niggas was just Spanish at that time. So um saying that to say, you're gonna see why I'm trying to put so much of an emphasis on that in a second. uh a lot of Caribbean people of all forms. Like I remember at one point I was going to a Guyanese church. um I remember I remember just always being around those kind of people. But then a lot of Jamaicans too. Even most of my then a lot of Jamaicans too. Even most of my friends are like Jamaicans. I don't like that phrase, but just to paint a picture, that a lot of them are like the Bobby Smurters and Rowdy Rebels of the world. Like people who you wouldn't know they was Jamaican, kind of like Busta Rhymes, but if they started speaking in their accent, it would be pretty thick. You know what I'm saying? Um, I'm not sure if Roddy is Jamaican, but he's probably some sort of Caribbean. But yeah, um, growing up around a lot of people like that. And then I had in Maryland probably more, but I had like, friends who had family who come from down south, or maybe they would be like half Jamaican, half like family comes from the south. But if we're talking mostly, it would be Caribbean people. Um, so something interesting again. Jamaica, which is really ex-Mica, that's what like the indigenous people call it. Jamaica is a Spanish word, but we're saying it in English. So I forgot, someone was teaching me what the Spanish, like how you supposed to say it in Spanish, like if it's Jamaica or something like that, but it's supposed to be a Spanish word. I'm about to pull it up. I'm about to pull it up and read you the map of Jamaica, just so you can have all the names. You start, right, remember I said it was a Spanish, okay. So remember I'm saying Jamaica is supposed to be a Spanish country. Remember the English came and took it over. But originally it was a Spanish territory. Now the story goes, gotta emphasize that that's the story. The story goes that this was the Arawaks and they were the original people. But I don't know. I can't go by their stories. I believe the Arawaks, yes, were the original people, but the Arawak deity is named, the mother goddess is named Atabey. You know what I'm saying? Anything with Bay in it, whether it's Bay, Bey, is Moorish. You know what I'm saying? And Arawak has an Arabic connection. And even when you see the Maroons, like if you see old depictions of them, you see them in turbans. And as far as we're concerned, with real evidence, there's no people that we can point up or put a finger on besides them Maroons. There ain't nothing of no remains of nothing else. There ain't no archaeology of nobody that they digging up. The first people that they have evidence of are the Maroons. You know what I'm saying? Because supposedly everybody else was supposed to be dead. But there's no archaeological evidence of them, no bones and nothing, but everybody else is supposed to be dead. But whatever. I say that to say because when you start to look at the map of Jamaica, another fun fact, the people who started the Jamaican Gleamer were Spanish people. There's all these names that are still Spanish, like Montego Bay, Savannah La Mar, Spanish Town. They didn't even change much there. Port Maria, Port Antonio, Morant Bay, and then all these bays, Buff Bay, Antano Bay, Ocho Rios. Nigga, do you hear that? Runaway Bay. Negril, that gotta be a Spanish word. And when you looking at maps and shit, look at it from like, getting very specific. You know what I'm saying? Go back to, in your, like, when you watching movies. That's gonna be a whole nother video. That's part 2 to this. Let me keep going before I get off track. But yeah, Lucia. Like, even they even have a town called Moortown. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one else noticed that but me? You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, so I say that to say, if I was growing up around a lot of Spanish people, right? And today I incarnate as an American, as a so-called African American who has parents from Jamaica. That's how they would title me. But in another lifetime, let's say in another lifetime, I was one of these original people walking around Jamaica when niggas was still, when whoever named Port Maria was still there. You know what I'm saying? When whoever named Port Antonio, or whoever came up with Spanish Town, when they were still there. So that would make me, if I was around with one of them people when the country is like still Spanish, that would make me, Spanish. Because the people who was there and the people who was like in Puerto Rico and DR are the same people. The people who they say came and conquered them, right? They're the same people. They're the one empire. They're the one army. They might be a little different because of the admixtures and then certain clan, but like overall, ancestry wise, I'm saying they're a part of the same gang. Let's look at it like that. They're part of the same gang. Not they're gonna be there exactly the same, but they're part of the same gang. So if in another lifetime I was one of these niggas in Port Maria, you know what I'm saying, and those people spoke Spanish, then maybe these people I was going to school with, I'm just linking up with them again. You know what I'm saying? Because really and truly, we have the same ancestry, even though we don't look the same. And some of them niggas did look like me. Some of them niggas' hair was kinkier than mine, even if their skin was lighter. You know what I'm saying? What if this is just, I'm going to school with them, and in this way, like every lifetime, I have a theory that in every lifetime we're always linking up around the same people. Hold on. Okay, hold on. Let me pause for a second so we on the same page. One of my theories is that the people that we're around, we have a connection to. It's not by accident. There's no coincidence. And we just keep linking up with these people in different lifetimes. So in this lifetime, you're a classmate. But in another lifetime, we might have been, we might have been in the same group. We was all pirates. In another lifetime, we might have been all like Vikings or something. I don't know, I'm just making up random shit. But like, you ever see where like SpongeBob, he'll see an ancestor for the 1400s and they're Vikings. Then you might see another ancestor from like another time. Like, you ever seen cartoons kind of do that? That's kind of what I'm referencing. That's what I mean. Like, that's just my theory. That all the people that were around, we keep linking up with lifetime after lifetime. And I feel like the clues to that being a real thing is that when you start looking up your name, when you start looking up the country's history and stuff, when you start looking up the name of these other people, you'll start seeing that it has a correlation. Because I'm trying to paint the picture of Jamaica's Spanish connection. So when I'm in a school with all Spanish people, in another lifetime, because one, we have some of the same ancestry, regardless of what we look like. I'm just talking about DNA. And some of them did look like me. But we have the same ancestry where it's like we have the Taino connection and we have the whoever these people was naming all this shit, some Spanish shit. Because in another, like in this lifetime, we think someone who speaks these languages like Spanish, French, and stuff like that means that they were white, when that's not what it means. Because this is why I kind of mentioned the Moors and stuff a lot, because this is a general term, but that term means like black man. So if you hear the black man used to speak Spanish, or that was a black man language, then it'll help change your perspective. So maybe I'll just start saying it like that. But even when I'm saying that I'm connected to these people, sometimes people hear that and they start thinking like, you're connected to someone who looks like Mark Anthony. And it's like, no, I'm connected to someone who probably looked just like me, have these same braids, was doing something very similar to what I do right now, and just happened to speak Spanish and live in this area. You know what I'm saying? So if 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 I have that kind of connection, you can see how, and I may just have a period in my time, or you can see how it wouldn't be too far off from me being around a lot of Spanish people, because even though Jamaica is English now, its roots is clearly still Spanish. So if you're connected to the indigenous people, you're connected to those roots. So yeah, if you have Spanish friends, y'all might have been friends in another lifetime. Because in another lifetime, DR, like what we call Espanola and Ex-Mica and all these different places, 80 and what we call these places now, like Puerto Rico, I forgot what the indigenous name of that was, but what we call these places now were connected. Like they wasn't all one, but they were all one because they were the same people. They might not have looked exactly the same, but they were like the same gang. They were part of the same empire. You know what I'm saying? They were part of the same, like we might be, like we might sail from from island to island. Like you driving to New York, and they're all our islands, and we're kind of like just cousins. So maybe these niggas is my distant cousins or something. These my Taino cousins, whatever. I'm starting to look at it like that. Like you ever seen Holes? You ever seen Holes with like how Madame Zeroni and that nigga that had to take her up the mountain, they came back as a reincarnation. That's the picture I'm trying to paint. Like these people that we around, like we just keep being around the same people, different lifetime. In another lifetime, when we were our third or eighth grandparent, we might have been on a different island or something. We might have been in another continent, whatever. But we was the same people, hanging out, doing the same thing. But like I said, in this lifetime, we just hanging out in third grade. At another lifetime, we might have been hanging out in the saloon. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying to try to make that type of correlation. All of my, like, I have Irish ancestry. All of my friends have, all of my friends that I'm close to recently have names that go back to Irish ancestry. You know what I'm saying? Irish or Scottish. Like, I'm starting to think stuff like that is not a coincidence. Because even if people will say it's a slave name, it's not. But even if it was, it's like, what's the correlation that all of these niggas would have the same similar slave name? You know what I'm saying? Because that means either one of two things. They had to be around this, like, plantation owners or something that was neighbors, or they had to be around, or these are their last names. And if they go back to Ireland, and if you look at the Irish map, the last name, like there's Irish maps you can pull up and Scottish maps where the last names are on the map. And when you start looking at it, you're like, wow, the person with my last name and this the person's last name, them niggas was right next to each other on the map. The same way such and such is like my next door neighbor. Like she just lives down the street. And then it almost seems like we're just following each other. It almost seems like we've never left each other's side. Like, I'm so serious. Like, I hope I'm articulating this properly, because I know there's a way. I know if this makes sense to you, this should hopefully open your eyes to something. I just hope I'm articulating it properly. Like, this shit is fucking interesting. You know, you're interesting. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I'm not special. I'm not trying to go all day on myself. I'm just trying to make these interesting correlations. I'm trying to really figure out like who we are, like on a deep level. Not on some we was kings 5,000 years ago. I'm starting to feel like some niggas is still living like that so-called king right now. We don't even peep it. Because we so fixated on the Illuminati and stuff, like, you don't understand, like when your uncle is a bishop or something, or a deacon, that means something. Like in the old world, they didn't just make anybody that. That was a big deal. Like to be the preacher or something, like I'm not bigging this up. I'm just painting a picture like that nigga might be some Illuminati nigga, and not like he's necessarily 100% evil or doing something wild. Like, no, I'm just saying that he might be highly connected. He might be somebody who makes things happen and is a big power pusher, and you never even realized it or never even looked at it that way. And I'm not even saying that like in a spooky evil way. I'm saying like, you know, you could be connected to people who have power right now and you don't even realize it. You could be connected to people who make big moves, who are important right now and you don't realize it, or who were. Especially, like, this is really dedicated to people who would come from a foreign country. Because we have it, our parents had it all fucked up. They don't know that, like, not, this ain't even a video for that, but especially people who come from a foreign country, because you don't even understand that people from all over the world applied to come over here. But why did we get in? What's so special about our family? Why do we live in these historically prestigious places? If you was born in Rome, you might feel special. You might be like, oh, you know, this is where the Colosseum and all that shit was. But you don't realize that shit that's important historically like that was happening where you live, where your parents is from, where your family is from. And that's important to know, because that's important to know that you're connected to it. Your story is deeper than what you know. And there's a lot of correlations and stuff you can make once you take the time to. You know, like, all of this shit is interesting. Arabic and Spanish are very similar languages. You can look up videos where a lot of the words are the same. If you have an Arabic name like me, and then let's say you have a connection to one of these places in Jamaica that used to be a Spanish place, your name might have been like an Arabic name, or I don't even think I'm saying that right. And some of the correlations I'm trying to make is, you got to understand there's a reason why we have the names we have. People be talking about European names. What European name? Nigga, most niggas have Arabic names or fucking native names, what niggas misclassify as ghetto, and be telling niggas they need to be ashamed of their name. There's a reason why we got these. You know what I'm saying? And it's all a part of your story. And even if you don't necessarily have a quote unquote native / ghetto name or Arabic name, whatever you was named, if it is European, if it is European, there was Moors or people that's called that lived in Europe too, and you could be connected to them. So when people tell you you're participating in European behavior, that might be because you're a European. You have European ancestry. A lot of people, it's not a coincidence. Niggas was growing up, as much as we was hearing, oh, you got Indian family, niggas was hearing shit like you're Irish. Oh, we got a little French. Oh, we got a little this, we got a little that. You know, but I got something coming. A whole deep dive on that. I'm going to do another video with Jet. And niggas going to do a whole deep dive on that. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to take you out of the idea of you just being some slave something somewhere. Your history is more than that. And you gotta, what you see yourself as is what the world reflects around you. So the minute you start seeing yourself as something greater is the minute you're gonna start living a greater life. And it won't be a moment until then. And these are ways to permanently reprogram your life, permanently change your reality. Have you start looking at everyone around you different. Like, yo, I really had to sit back and think. Once I deprogrammed from the idea that black people were super poor, I really had to sit back and think, like, yo, Jamaicans are only known for having luxurious things. Like, what are we known for? Like, having Lexuses and BMWs and Benzes and just luxury. Like, we're known for that. Like, we're known for having certain clothes and stuff like that. Like even aside, take it off of being Jamaican, is universally grew up hearing phrases like, my grandma, take off your grandma's fur coat. You know what I'm saying? Or your grandma's fur. But nigga, how did your grandma get a fur? Do you know how much a fur was? You think it was cheap because it was 1950? Who is she? You know what kind of people used to wear furs? You ever think about that? You thinking she just some little old church lady. You know what I'm saying? But you, again, it's like us not knowing who we are. That's why I'm like woo and stuff, because I can't really go in without the proper context. But if you knew who we was, you would start even looking at the niggas who you knew, like growing up in church with, who was important. Like if they was important in the church, like that even means something because of what that goes back to. But I ain't even about to go there. I keep saying that because all of those revolve other videos, but I think I'm gonna just wrap it here. You know, I hope you could watch this and start doing this for your life. Don't even like fuck me. Like what I'm saying about me is important to me and my story. What I'm saying about me is important to me and my story. But don't take it as I'm special. You are special. You know what I'm saying? You have these correlations that you need to make. This could also help you trace your ancestry, all of that. You know what I'm saying? The people you are around is for a reason. Where you was born is for a reason. You are on earth for a reason. You have a purpose. You know what I'm saying? All of these things connect you and tie you to who you are, where you come from. Help you fall in love with yourself. Fall in love with your story the way you in love with your favorite celeb, athlete, whatever story. Your story is important too.